Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Grace. So ever since The Gilded Age came back onto TV, I've been really drawn to historical fiction, and I read 3 books last week that I completely enjoyed. One of them I think is my favorite book of the year. I've mentioned before, historical fiction is one of my favorite genres. Ever since American Girls, Dear America, it's always just been a comfort thing for me to read historical fiction. So the 3 books I read were The Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies. That is my favorite book of the year. The Address by Fiona Davis and American Beauty by Shana Abe. Both The Address and American Beauty were the second books I read from each author, and I totally enjoyed them. Alright, I had a lot of technical difficulties today, so the lighting might be a little bit different. Anyways, The Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies. I don't remember how I came across this book, but I read it on my library's app once I saw that it was available, and I loved this book as soon as I finished reading it because it said it was book 1 of a series. I looked up the author. I basically just stalked her online and saw that the second book is in the works, that she already finished writing it and it's in the editing process. So I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year down the line. I cannot wait though. This book is historical fiction. It has a mystery. It has a good romance. And I said in another video that romances are usually my least favorite storyline in a book. Our main character is Lady Augusta Colebrook. She goes by Gus. She is a twin and a 41-year-old spinster. So she's never had a relationship and never come close to getting married, which her brother puts her down for. And she has a twin sister, Julia, who is also a spinster, but she was engaged to be married, but her fiance passed away before they could be married, and she just actually loved him. And this was Regency era London, so love matches weren't super common, but she did really love the man that she was going to marry. And their brother Duffy is constantly putting Julia down for being a spinster and telling her she's old, nobody wants to see her, nobody wants to listen to her. But he kind of gives a little nod to Julia, kind of well, you try to do the right thing. You try to be a proper woman. And one thing I enjoyed about this book is Julia is an unconventional woman for that time. But she wasn't treated like an outsider. A lot of times when you have a character like this in a book, they're the outcast. Nobody gets along with them. Everybody talks about them behind their back. But in this book, you know that Gus is respected by her friends and society. It's just her brother and really small-minded men that try to put her down because she intimidates them. She's physically tall and she is intelligent and she does speak her mind. So when this book opens up, they are trying to retrieve letters on behalf of their friend, the Countess Davenport. They are doing this because when their father passed away, he passed away in a brothel. It was a very scandalous situation, but it was made more scandalous because Gus went to go pick up his body. She was the favorite child. She got along with her dad the best. Her dad always told her he wishes she was born a boy because they just got along so well, and he didn't get along with his son. So Gus was just distraught and she went to go pick up his body, and later on it became a huge scandal because she's a lady. She's not supposed to know what a brothel is, let alone know where it's at and go inside one. So the Countess stood by them and kind of just made everybody not talk about it and still accept them, so they were still in good standing. So because of that, when the Countess found herself in a sticky situation, they volunteered to help her. So they went to go meet her, the person she was having an affair with, and retrieve some letters that he was blackmailing her with. Is one of those characters in the book that's kind of nasty and dismissing them and trying to put them in an uncomfortable position because they're women. But Gus gets the upper hand in that situation, and she's able to retrieve the letters and keep the necklace, and the man ended up leaving London. So from here on, it sets this precedent where the Countess is it would have been really bad for me, but there are women in really bad situations that you can help out. It starts off with they have this family relative that they think her husband is holding her hostage and trying to kill her because he has cut her off from her family and is not letting her communicate. So they have to devise this plan to get her out of their home and into the safety of her family. And along the highway, they get held up by these robbers. And Gus figures out that one of the men is Lord Evan Belford, who was accused and convicted of murder and sent to the colonies to serve his sentence, but he absconded. Though the absconded isn't fully known yet. Well, you do know it from the back of the book. But when they meet, they have a meet cute. It is adorable. She kicks his ass and he respects her for it. And after their meeting, Julia's looking at Gus you're mooncalfing. How are you mooning over this man that you met for 5 minutes? And she was he didn't dismiss me and he had a sense of humor. And Julia was like, ah, because that was rare in that time. So now you have more adventures that are going on, and Gus is determined to figure out the mystery of the alleged murder that Lord Evan did, because it just doesn't add up with what people are telling her about him. I don't want to give too much away, but like the book was funny, the dialogue was funny, and every storyline was great. 5 out of 5 stars. The next book is The Address by Fiona Davis. I read The Dollhouse by her like a year or two ago, and it has a similar setup. There is a timeline in the past and a timeline more in the present time, and they're interwoven and they're going to come to a head together. I feel like it started off a little bit slow, but it got really, really good. So in the past timeline, it's like during the Gilded Age, the late 1800s, and you have Sarah Smith, who is a housekeeper at a really fancy hotel in London. While she's on her shift, she sees a child like about to plunge to their death. So she runs to the apartment, she saves the kid, and the American family that like that kid belongs to, they're obviously very grateful that she saved their kid. And the husband eventually goes down to thank Sarah for what she did. And he also starts asking her a bunch of questions about her job, which she finds very odd. And then he tells her, it's because I am an architect and I am designing this apartment building in New York that I want to function like a fancy hotel. And it is going to be called the Dakota. And the more he asks her, the more he likes her, and he likes her attitude. And he says, you know what, you have all the experience that I need. Would you be willing to come down to America, and I'll pay for your ticket and I'll get you there and you can work there. So she debates over it for a little bit, but then she's like, I'm never going to have an opportunity like this again. And she takes the job. The more modern timeline is in the 80s, the 1980s. So I thought that was a little bit weird, but then I realized like there's a lot of things that can happen in the 80s and early 90s that just wouldn't happen today because of technology. It's like when you watch Seinfeld, most of those plots would not happen today because of cell phones and just like modern technology. A big part of the timeline in the 80s is DNA is barely starting to be discovered, or like, being able to test and find genetic links. That plays a big part of it, because in the modern timeline, you have this girl, Bailey, who is related to a very well-off family because her grandfather was a ward, basically like an adopted kid, but he wasn't a blood relative, so they don't have any of the financial security that her cousins have. And it kind of causes this big strife between her father and that family. And she has her cousin, Melinda, which Melinda always makes it clear, like, you're my cousin. I love you like a sister. Like, you're the closest thing to me, but you're not family. Like, when it comes to the family, that's when Melinda kind of draws the line. And she's just reminding Bailey that she's not family and she doesn't deserve this and she doesn't deserve that. And she is a charity case almost for Melinda. It's very like subtle, but you can see it like as a reader that she is controlling Bailey like through money and putting her down. Bailey is a recovering drug addict and an interior designer. She lost her job, but Melinda offers her to stay at the apartment in the Dakota while she remodels for her. And she's like, I'll pay you once I get my trust fund, which is kicking in a few months. So the timeline is in the past in the Dakota and in the 1980s of the Dakota. And they're just like, as a reader, you see things that like the modern timeline doesn't know. And it's like, you're adding it up. I don't want to give anything away, but it was a really good book. It was like a slow burn because I feel like in the beginning it wasn't picking up pace. But then when you see hints about the past, then you're just like, okay, I need to like get up to speed on what actually happened. All right, and the other book is An American Beauty by Shauna Abe. I read the second Mrs. Astor by her like at the end of November. That was her first book, and I liked it, and I wanted to stay in like the Gilded Age era books. So I picked this book up on my Nook. This book was interesting. I didn't know who the main character was until after I finished it, and I looked her up. But her name is Arabella Yarrington Huntington. When she was like 17 or 18, she was working at a gambling house when she met this very wealthy older man. And basically she becomes his mistress, but it is her story throughout that time. One thing that I thought was interesting was as her story was developing, I was like, this reminds me a lot about this character in The Gilded Age, and it was Sylvia Chamberlain. And then I read that she was based on Arabella Huntington, but I don't know why they changed her name for the show because she wasn't a huge character. That is something that is interesting about The Gilded Age because you have these characters that are based on real historical figures like Mrs. Astor, Ward McAllister, Mamie Fish. And then you have these characters that are inspired. And there's some characters that I can understand why they changed the name because it'll give like a plot away. Like in season 2, there was a big one. But for someone like Sylvia Chamberlain, she wasn't a huge character, so I don't know why they didn't just give her the name Arabella Huntington, because the similarities were all there. She was a mistress to begin with. She wasn't accepted into the high society because everyone knew where she came from, that she was the mistress before she became the second wife. And yeah, it was like more of a slow read, but I did enjoy reading about her. She was an interesting person. She was really ballsy because again, this is a historical person, so you know where it's going before it goes there. But this real life woman actually married this multimillionaire, became his second wife. She already had a kid by him, but when they got married, he adopted that kid, which was biologically his. And then when he passes away, she ends up marrying his nephew after he got divorced. So in this book, you see her being scandalous, and it's funny looking her up afterwards what she actually looked like, because she looked like a very prim and proper stern lady, but you know, she was wild. Anyways, those are the books that I've read so far in the month of December. I'm fully into a historical fiction mood, but I've seen a couple books. I don't know which direction I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna pick out my TBR for the rest of the month. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.